Hi, I'm Pat Keegan, and welcome to the shop. This week, and for the next several weeks, I'm going to show you how you can create your own set of custom kitchen cabinets. I'm a huge fan of DIY and a big believer that people can truly do this themselves if they have a small amount of education and if they take the time to develop skills through practice, and you have a small amount of money to invest in the right tools to make the job go quickly and efficiently. Fortunately for us, our kitchen is relatively small, so the cabinets aren't that complicated. But in general, cabinets aren't that complicated at all. They're simply a plywood box to which is attached a wooden face frame, to which then is attached your doors and your drawers. An option you may want to consider, and one that we'll be doing here in order to expedite the process, is to order your doors and drawers from a company that specializes in manufacturing them. Oftentimes it's faster and less expensive from the whole project standpoint to have your doors made for you, shipped to your home, and then you can stain them and finish them to match the rest of the face frames. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you the total construction of the upper cabinets, as the face frames were started before this video was made. But I will walk you through the face frames very quickly so that you can see how the boxes will be created later. Since I don't have my usual cameraman here with me today, I'll just be walking you through this by myself, and hopefully you can get a good enough view from where you're at. So this is one of the cabinet face frames. As you can kind of see, before it falls down, as you can kind of see, it's going to host 5 total doors. There'll be 2 doors here, there'll be another set of double doors here, and there'll be a single door here where the edge goes against the wall. This face frame is made using pocket hole joinery. It's a very simple kind of joinery, and it's one of those tools that I mentioned that's a small amount of money to invest relative to the cost of doing this kitchen and having it paid for being done overall. For the second set of cabinet uppers, this is going to be mounted over a stove, and it's going to have a microwave mounted underneath the cabinet that's going up here. As you can see, the cabinet has 2 sides, 2 cabinet doors on either side, and it's going to have a double door here in the front. Underneath is going to be mounted a microwave. It's a really good idea when you're doing your custom cabinets to make sure that you have your appliances picked out in advance so that you know what their measurements are going to be. For example, most cabinets are 12 inches deep. The microwaves, for undermount microwaves above the stove, are typically 16 inches deep. So that presents a problem where the microwave sticks out about 4 inches. I bet if you go into your kitchen or your friend's kitchen, you'll see several examples like that where the microwave sticks out about 4 inches. I don't particularly like that look, but you do need it to stick out a little bit for the door mechanism to work here on the hinge side of the microwave. So what I'm going to be doing is building this cabinet 15 inches deep instead of 12 inches deep. That's the great thing about custom cabinets, is you can either order them and pay a lot of money, or you can make them the way you want and pay a lot less. So now I'll show you how the face frame is put together, even though this one is already together. It'd be hard for the camera at this angle to get this, but basically this is an 8-piece frame that was put together. You can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stiles, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rails. The stiles are the vertical pieces, the rails are the horizontal. The way I like to put my stiles and rails together is I don't like to have any end grain showing except for underneath where people aren't really going to see it. So I will cut my outside left and outside right stiles from top to bottom. So this is one piece from here to here, rather than cutting it here and letting the rail go over to the edge, because then you'll see this end grain on the rail and you don't really want to see that. So once all the pieces are cut to the precise measurements, then I drill pocket holes in each of the pieces that are going to go into the butt up against the other pieces, and then we just drill the pocket screws in there. And again, I'll show you this entire process for the lower cabinets, but for now, just to get an idea of what goes on. So once those face frames are put together, then I basically apply a stain and a wipe-on polyurethane. This has 1 coat of urethane on it. I'll put another coat on it today before we leave so that it'll be ready. Now typically I put 3 to 4 coats of this wipe-on polyurethane because it's not as, when you wipe on the polyurethane, it's not as thick as when you brush it on, so you want to put more coats, but it dries very quickly, and it leaves a really great finish, so I really like the use of the wipe-on poly. And it's much easier to work with. It doesn't drip as much as regular polyurethane, etc. Anyway, so then I applied a coat of stain here, and I'll end up doing 3 to 4 coats of the polyurethane before we're all done. But I do like to put a couple coats on, then I start to work with the wood, and I'll show you a little bit more. Okay, now let's talk plywood boxes. So I get typically 2 types of plywood when I'm building cabinets. I'm going to get a pre-finished maple plywood for the interior of the box, and I'll show you that in a second. And then I get a cabinet grade veneered plywood, which has the wood veneer of the wood that I want to see to match the face frames. So in this particular instance, the wood is cherry, so I'll get solid cherry stock in order to make the face frames, and this will be a cherry veneer plywood, rotary core plywood that I have. It's reasonably cheap, you know, with respect again to the whole cost of the kitchen. And then again, I like to work with it. The shop that I go to get this particular plywood is real good about cutting pieces for me. They've got a shop in the back. They do a lot of milling and stuff like that too. So I have them, because I have a small shop here, I have them cut these pieces roughly down to size. I don't have them cut precise, although I could if I wanted to, but I like to do a little bit of that myself, just in case there's final fitting issues or something like that. So basically I'll take a 4x8 sheet of plywood and I'll have them cut it in half, and then I'll have one of the halves cut in half again, because typically the cabinets are 12 inches deep. So you'll get 2 pieces of 12 inch, and you'll get a larger piece of the 24 inch left over to do the base cabinets. Then again, it's easier to work, you know, and carry. 4x8 sheets are very heavy, and then you got to manage to cut them on a table saw or something like that. The shop that we have here, as I said, is pretty small, so we try to get a little bit of that done outside so they're more manageable once we get them inside. These then again, the panels themselves are just covered with a coat of the stain that I like, and again, more wipe-on poly to get that. And again, there's 2 coats on these right now, and then that allows for me to start using them and getting them all cut, and it, you know, may get nicked or, you know, scratched or something like that from moving it around, but because it has that protective coating on it, you know, I can just sand it off, and then in the final coat, when the cabinets are put together, then I'll put the final coat of polyurethane on. The other type of plywood that I use is a pre-finished maple plywood, and it might be difficult to see here, but it's a little bit glossy on one side because it's pre-finished. Now again, if you want to save even a little bit more money, you can buy a can of polyurethane or a can of varnish or a can of shellac, whatever you want to use, and you can do it yourself. It's about $25 more a sheet than the average cost of regular maple plywood, and I just think it's totally worth it because it comes pre-finished on both sides, and it's already done. It's a factory finish, so it's nice and hard. It's very scratch and water resistant. It's just worth the extra 25 bucks a sheet that you pay for it. So that's pretty much it with respect to the materials. So I'm going to start building the cabinet that goes behind this face frame first. So I'll be cutting my sides 14 1/4 inches back, and I'll be cutting the backs, and we're basically going to build 3 boxes, but we're going to screw them all together here in the shop before we hang them up. Now normally when your cabinets are delivered, if you have them ordered from a cabinet making shop, they're delivered in pieces that your designer or that you put together with your own design. They're in their individual pieces. So this particular cabinet would be 3 boxes. I've got the left box, the right box, and then the center one above the microwave that we just talked about. So those particular things will be screwed together, and they'll be installed as one unit. It's a little heavier to put them in as one unit, but it's much better with respect to walls being out of plumb or whatever. You're not jiggling 3 cabinets that you're trying to put together. You're just putting 1 cabinet up on the wall in the right space. So it's a little bit of a trade-off from installation value to weight value, and I'd rather have it on the installation value. Okay, so now I'm ready to cut my panels to their height that they're going to be for this cabinet. So since the cabinets are basically, the upper cabinets are going to be 42 inches high, and for this particular cabinet above the stove, we're going to make this 15 inches deep, I need to make these cabinets 42 inches by 14 and a quarter, because the 3/4 inch face frame that gets applied to the cabinet also counts in the cabinet's dimension. So what I like to do, because I don't, for these large pieces of wood, because I don't have fancy tools and different cutting saws to do this, and I don't have a good panel sled that would take a piece of plywood that's 8 feet long here, what I'm going to do is cut their heights down first, and then I can rip them to the right width, which is 14 and a quarter, on the table saw, which I am fortunate to have. So what I like to do is I like to take these spacers, which are made out of the same material. They're the maple, pre-finished maple plywood that I told you about earlier. I like to take these spacers and put them underneath. And then when I make my saw cut, I'm going to cut it, put the blade so that part of that blade is sinking inside the spacer. So A, I don't cut the table that I have made, and B, it helps prevent chip out on the back side and everything. So I'll draw a line and a straight edge and put that together, and then I'll cut those pieces to width. So I'll show you that in just a second. One thing I should definitely mention, you always want to wear eye protection, and you always want to wear ear protection. I see a lot of people not wearing the ear protection, and yeah, it doesn't look glamorous and everything, and there are some times that I don't use it myself, so I'm not 100% not guilty. But your hearing loss is progressive, so it happens over time. All the loud music I listened to as a kid, and all, you know, I still wear earplugs when I go running or something like that. So, you know, it's just very critically important to protect your hearing, and particularly your eyes. So always wear your safety glasses, and always wear your earphones if you can, or your headphones. Earphones. Okay, what I've got here that I wanted to show you is this is just a jig that I created. All it is 2 pieces of fiberboard that are put together. It's 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch is a little flimsy, so I make it out of 1/2 inch. And then what happens is when you put this across your piece of wood, the saw rides, the edge of the saw fence here, the base plate, rides against this edge here. And the reason I do that is, one, it's easier setup time for clamping and everything, that I have one thing that I just put the edge on my marks to start the cut. But the second thing that it does is when you cut plywood and that saw blade, it moves through this way. So as it's cutting down the front, you know, it moves in a circular motion. So as it's cutting down through the top of the wood, the blade is pushing that wood through. But when it comes back out the top on the front side of the piece of wood, it's actually ripping through the top. And what that does to plywood, plywood has these little thin layers that are sandwiched and baked over the actual core of the plywood. It can tear out the piece on both sides. So that's why when you cut plywood, if you take a saw, try to cut a piece of plywood crosswise very quickly, and you'll get this tear out that basically takes the veneer of the plywood and tears it out, you know, upwards at the front of the blade. So this helps prevent that from happening to the particular cut that you're on. That's why we do that. And you just make it by putting 2 pieces together a little bit longer than you need, and then as you cut through it the first time, the saw basically cuts to the right size that fits your saw. Very simple, but very important. if you can see that, but you can see a little bit of chip out right there. That's what happens when the front of the blade comes up through the wood because it's moving in a circular motion. But you can see for the most part that, it's pretty clean. And that's, largely on the piece that matters, which is the side of the actual cabinet. That's what that, base jig is used for when we do those actual cuts. Okay, so now I've got the two outside panels are cut to 42 inches. Now I've got to do that to several more pieces that come from the pre-finished plywood, because the way we're building this is I'm using the pre-maple plywood as the boxes, and then the cherry plywood is the panel to go over them. Okay, what I've done so far is I just have the panels cut for the outside of the cabinet. So, if you can remember this particular face frame that I have right here, do a quick review. So the panels that are exposed on this side and on the other side are going to be made out of the cherry veneered plywood, which I just cut. Now the inside of the cabinets, the left and right walls here, left right there, those have to be made out of the pre-finished maple plywood, as well as the backs, the tops, and the bottoms. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those pieces to fit, and I've all measured them out, and I'll post some measurements if you want them, although they may not fit your kitchen, but I'll definitely post them. But anyway, the sides and the backs all have to be 42 inches long. And then it's the inside bottom and inside top that have to be, different sizes, obviously. So now I'll cut those pieces to fit, and then you'll see how those get assembled in just a second. Okay. The cool thing is you want to save all your scrap, because you never know that this might be used for, well, you should know, I guess, if you draw it all out, but you never know in general. A piece might be able to be used for a shelf or, a top or a bottom of a thinner cabinet. So particularly because this stuff is so expensive, I definitely save every scrap I can. I throw away very little in that regard. Okay, basically what I have done now is I have the sides and the backs of both of the left half and the right half, so now all I have to do is make the one in the middle. So I'll cut those pieces and then we'll show you how we start putting everything together. Okay, now that I have all of my pieces rough cut to size, or at least one dimension is good, the other dimensions are still rough cut from where I had the plywood cut at the shop, now I can turn to my table saw and, basically cut the plywood to final dimension. So one of the things that, I've done here is I've removed the blade guard. So, if you do this, please be very, very, very careful. I don't recommend it. You should always follow all of the safety recommendations that are provided with the equipment that you buy. But for some purposes, it's easier to show the cuts with the camera and everything like that. So, but anyway, just two quick things about the table saw. One of the things I put in here is called the zero clearance insert, and it does the same thing that, as I explained earlier with the cutting jig for the circular saw. It helps to prevent some of the tear out when you're cutting plywood across the grain. So you definitely should have a zero clearance insert if you have them for your table saw. So that just basically pops in like that, and it sits there, and you can see along with the saw that it's very tight up against the blade, so it prevents a lot of that tear off from plywood. I mean, I use it all the time unless I have a dado blade in there or something like that. So what I'm going to do is just basically set my saw here to the final dimensions and make sure everything gets cut right. And always, never forget, always remember your eyes and ears. So make sure you have those available whenever you're cutting anything or drilling anything. Okay, well, now all of our pieces are cut to size. I've got all the sides, the backs, the tops, the bottoms, everything cut to size. So we're ready for some assembly here. It's getting a little bit late in the day now. I started this a little bit late this afternoon, so we'll pick this up tomorrow and hope to see you then. Thanks.